Welcome and good afternoon to everyone joining us from any part of the world. So, good afternoon, good morning, good evening to everyone. Before we begin, I'll introduce myself. My name is Evangeline. I'm the Alumni Engagement Officer with the CSE Alumni team, and I'm pleased to welcome our webinar speaker today to deliver a webinar on environmental sustainability and circularity in clothing global value chains and lessons for manufacturers. And today we have with us Denanjalee Gunaratne, who is a 2018 Commonwealth Shed Scholar from Sri Lanka. She completed her MSc in International Business at the University of Leeds. A bit of more background about the speaker. So, Denanjali is a postdoctoral researcher at LUT University in Finland currently. She specializes in sustainability and international business. She completed her PhD in management at the University of Glasgow, and her research explored the intersection of sustainability, Industry 4.0 technologies, and business model innovation, with a particular focus on the clothing manufacturers in developing countries. And that is what she will touch upon in her webinar today and share her expertise and also her research and her ongoing work in this space. So, Dhananjali, over to you. I'd like to welcome you to present your webinar today.
Oh, thank you so much for the lovely introduction, Eva. So once again, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone joining us from across the world for my presentation today. So before starting the presentation, let me take 2 to 3 minutes to quickly thank some of the key individuals who has shaped my academic journey and also the current research focus on the clothing global value chain. So first, let me thank the Commonwealth Development in Action webinar organizers, especially Eva. Many thanks for inviting me for the presentation today. Then I must also express my heartiest gratitude to the Commonwealth Scholarship Commission and also the University of Leeds for funding my Commonwealth shared scholarship. Well, their generous support opened the world of international business research to me. Then, back in 2018, as Eva said, I started my master's in University of Leeds with this strong desire to speak for the developing countries and emerging markets because these markets tend to be overlooked in the mainstream international business research because the international business research mainly focuses on multinational companies operating in the developed worlds. So I was inspired to do a research based on the Sri Lankan apparel industry. Particularly, I studied how the Sri Lankan apparel manufacturers upgrade in the global apparel industry, navigating the power dynamics, working with the leading fashion brands. So with this research, I was inspired to further continue to study the dynamics of the apparel global value chains. So I decided to do a PhD at University of Glasgow. In that research, I was inspired to look into policy aspects and also developing managerial interventions. So I was studying around advanced technologies as Eva identified Industry 4.0 technology. So I was looking into different technologies such as artificial intelligence, big data analytics, blockchain technologies, how these technologies promise sustainability and how they are expected to change the sustainability landscape. And I was also looking at the impact of these transformations, digital and the green transformation, on the manufacturers in developing countries. So today's session that I'm going to present is based on my doctoral thesis, a paper that is currently under peer review in one of the international business journals. So I would like to take this moment to thank my beloved supervisors, Professor Rudolf Sinkowitz and Professor Naomi Sinkowitz, who have played an instrumental role in shaping this paper, as well as my doctoral thesis. So without taking much of time, let us dive deep into today's topic, which is on environmental sustainability and circularity, including global value chains, the lessons for manufacturers. As you know, the global fashion industry is increasingly under public scrutiny, not just because of the fast-paced consumerism, but for the environmental and societal toll it leaves behind. So in this presentation, I will be mainly focusing on the environmental aspects of the clothing global value chains. Specifically, I will highlight how the recent policy developments, such as the European Union strategy for sustainable and circular textiles and the growing implementation of the extended producer responsibility programs in countries such as the US, UK, and also EU, and how these regulations are changing the sustainability landscape and how these are shaping the practices of leading multinational companies that we all know. For example, the fashion stores that we also know, and also the specialty retailers that we also know. So how the regulatory environment is impacting these multinational brands. And I will also show you how these changes is expected to change the landscape for the manufacturers from the developing countries. For example, manufacturers from Sri Lanka, maybe Bangladesh, India, or Vietnam, or the emerging players in the African region. Finally, I will highlight some policy and managerial insights to promote sustainable and circular practices. So, to start off, let me ask a simple question about a simple item almost all of us own at least one. Sometimes many of us own too many, which is a simple t-shirt. Maybe you can use the chat and take around 2 to 3 minutes to answer this question. Where was your last t-shirt that you purchased made? Were you aware of its journey to your wardrobe when you purchased it?
Please do take this opportunity to respond to the question by using your chat box. Thank you. Yes, I can see some responses coming through.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, good. So it seems like people have focused on where the t-shirt was made, but actually not a lot of customers are aware
Yes, we
from
have
the journey. Great.
Myanmar, Cambodia, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, China, Kenya, India, Jamaica. Oh, okay.
Good. So that shows the large number of countries producing the apparel. Good. Thank you so much for your answers. So thank you so much. So yeah, so this shows the dynamics of the industry. Thank you so much. So I will move forward with the presentation. Thank you for your answers. So I'm about to tell you a story of the t-shirt that you might have purchased. So behind every t-shirt, oh, give me 1 second to change the slides. Okay, so behind every t-shirt lies a complex global story, one that links cotton fields, chemical plants, sewing factories, shipping containers, retail shops, and even landfills. So the story I will tell you, it's not just a story of fashion, but it is also a story of extraction, exploitation, and environmental degradation. So most t-shirts are made from cotton, and cotton is grown over 80 countries, including China, US, India, and Pakistan. If I point to the statistics, just 2018-19, in this year, over 25.9 million tons of cotton fiber were produced globally. But here are the environmental costs. Producing 1 ton of cotton requires equivalent of 1.5 Olympic-sized swimming pools of water. That means just one t-shirt can consume more than 7,000 water only during the production of cotton stage. So water is not just the only concern. Cotton also uses heavy doses of chemical. About 6% of global pesticide use is spent on cotton manufacturing. And these chemicals seep into soil and water, harming both ecosystems and human health. From a carbon emission point of view, around 8% of t-shirts' total emission come from cotton farming alone. And this depends on the production method, fiber type, the geography that is manufactured. For example, research shows that cotton grown in India emits nearly twice as much as the CO2 per kilogram as organically grown cotton in the US. Now let's turn to polyester, another common t-shirt fabric, which is chosen for its low cost and durability. Today, many brands also promote that they manufacture t-shirts from recycled polyester or from recycled plastic bottles, but polyester still originates from crude oil. The production is centered in countries such as the US, Southeast Asia, and Middle East, but there is a significant fossil footprint. So once the fiber is harvested, then it needs to be spun into yarn, and it consumes significant amount of electricity. In fact, spinning is the second largest source of emission in a t-shirt life cycle. I'm sure all of us like vibrant t-shirt colors, but dyeing textiles has a dark side. It requires vast quantities of water, involves chemical dyes, harming river soils and aquatic life. Well, textile dyeing is responsible up to 20% of the global industrial water pollution. Next, the t-shirt fabric gets cut and stitched and assembled. As you gave in your answers, mostly in countries like Bangladesh, China, Vietnam, Sri Lanka, India, or maybe the emerging markets in the African continent. So these factories are energy intensive and often generate large volumes of textile waste. Then these finished t-shirts are shipped across the world, mainly to the largest consumers in the US, UK, EU, or maybe Australia, Japan. So global transportation adds another layer of emission. But the story doesn't end there, so we purchase it. Over a lifetime, well, let's assume like 50 washers, the t-shirt contributes to greenhouse gas emission from washing, drying, ironing, and if it is made from synthetic fiber, it contributes to microplastic pollution in our waterways. And what about the clothes that we never wear and which sits in our wardrobe? If you consider UK alone, an estimated 40 billion pounds worth of clothes sits unused in wardrobe. Eventually, these garments are either donated or discarded to landfills globally. Over 92 million tons of textiles are discarded to landfills or incinerated every year. And the problem is growing. Global clothing consumption is already over 62 million tons per year, and it is expected to double by 2030. So I'm sure after hearing all these data and statistics, you will think twice before making your next t-shirt purchase. So moving to the environmental footprint. So this is how the environmental footprint unfolds across the global value chain. While Global North mainly contributes by consuming, Global South contributes by producing. The production side mainly happens in Global Southern countries, contributing to the pollution through agricultural pollution, chemical use, energy intensive manufacturing, and from the consumption and disposal happen in Global North at further impact through overconsumption, frequent laundering, and high volumes of waste. So if the industry continues in the current trajectory, continuing the business as usual, achieving 1.5 Celsius climate target set by the Paris Climate Agreement will be impossible. However, these overwhelming statistics around fashion environment's impact is seen and recognized by the consumer groups and also environmental activistic groups. So these groups are requesting for changing the industry where they highlight the importance of a roadmap that prioritizes sustainability over speed. But this brings us to an important question. Who actually decides what sustainable fashion means? Or in other words, who holds the power to shape the industry's sustainability agenda? Well, actually, there are two key actors driving the sustainability standards in the industry. The first one is the multinational enterprises, which includes the leading fashion brands, specialty retailers, and discount stores. I will not name them in the presentation, but I'm sure you know who they are. And also, there is the government and regulatory bodies, particularly in the major consuming and exporting countries. So, of course, I must also highlight that the important role that the consumers and the standard setting organizations and other NGOs plays in setting the standards in the industry. But for today's presentation, I'm interested more towards the multinational enterprises and government organizations and how their setting processes will impact the manufacturers in developing countries. So multinational enterprises set private standards and the government and regulatory organizations set public standards. Let's start with the multinational enterprises, fashion brands themselves. So, a recent report by the Fashion Revolution reveals some of the hard truths. Nearly 25% of the world's largest fashion brands disclose nothing about their decarbonization efforts. Only 4 out of 250 brands have emission targets aligned with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And most so-called eco-collections are still made from fossil fuel-based synthetic fiber. So what does all this highlight? It highlights the phenomenon called greenwashing, where brands use misleading or exaggerated claims to appear sustainable. But the pressure on brands is increasing. In response, many brands are now pushed to implement corporate codes of conduct, source from sustainably compliant suppliers, use more organic and recycled material, track and trace the emission across the value chain that I showed you, and also to set internal reduction goals. So these brand level initiatives are shaping the practices happening in the value chain and placing new demands on the manufacturers, particularly on Global South. On the other side of the equation, the government and regulatory organizations are stepping in with bold policies aiming to change the industry at a systemic level. One of the most important developments is the European Union Strategy for Sustainable and Circular Textile, which calls for clothing that is more durable, repairable, and recyclable. So this strategy doesn't stand alone. It comes with a comprehensive package of regulations and directives. I thought I will take like few minutes from the presentation to highlight you some of the regulatory components attached to this framework, so you better understand what could be the potential impact on the multinational enterprises and what this could mean for the manufacturers in developing countries. So one of the regulations is the Eco Design for Sustainable Product Regulation. So this regulation sets mandatory design requirements, including the minimum level of recycled content, restrictions on harmful material. So the idea is to increase the quality of the garments imported to the EU. So the manufacturers and the brands now need to improve the quality, compliance, and they need to have advanced product design and development capabilities to be aligned with the eco-design requirements imposed by this regulation. Another one is the Green Claims Directive. No longer garment manufacturers or brands can claim that they are sustainable without having substantial data, statistics to back their claims, which should be verified by third parties or regulatory authorities. So this means the brands need to collect data about their environmental footprint across the value chain. And also the manufacturers and suppliers need to also have the capability to provide this data for the brands. Then another regulation is the waste shipment regulation, which restrict exporting textile waste, particularly to the global southern countries, and it encouraged the brands to tackle their own waste globally. Another interesting regulation is the extended producer responsibility regulation, where the producers are financially and legally responsible to manage the end of life cycle impact of their products. Then another directive, which is in a controversial position, is the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, perhaps most significant among all these regulatory developments, where the brands are now responsible to identify, prevent, mitigate the environmental and human rights risks across the value chains. Now, if I compare the previous situation, previously mostly the brands reported either their environmental performance or the first level of manufacturers who directly worked with them. Now, with this new regulations coming into play, they cannot just report those statistics, but they have to go to the second level or the third level, or maybe even deeper, depending on the jurisdiction that they belong into when reporting this data. So these regulatory changes are not only happening in the EU, but also in the UK. For example, plastic packaging tax, the movement towards extended producer responsibility programs and increasing the transparency requirements is happening. Even if you take the context of the US, there are statewide regulatory developments. For example, Responsible Textile Recovery Act of California, Fashion Sustainability and Accountability Act of New York. France is making very bold statements in the regulatory environment. In June 2025, they actually passed the fast fashion regulation bill, where they distinguish between the ultra and classic fast fashion, banning certain advertisements and imposing heavy eco taxes for the companies. So all in all, it is very clear that these evolving policy changes are intensifying the pressure on multinational companies to be very sustainable. And as these standards are flowing from the government, regulatory organizations to brands, this inevitably goes to the manufacturers in the global south. However, this raises a very crucial question. Do the manufacturers in global south
has the necessary capacity to meet these demands? It is a very uncomfortable but a necessary question to ask, especially when we consider what is at stake for these countries. As you might know, the apparel industry has been foundational for the economic development in the global south. If you consider 2020 alone, these countries contributed to over 60% of the world's apparel export value. So their growth has been driven by key factors. For example, the access to free trade zones, a vast supplier base, preferential market access, abundant raw materials, but perhaps most importantly, these countries have a large pool of semi-skilled and unskilled labor, making them ideal for the labor-intensive garment manufacturing. Therefore, for many of these countries, participating into the apparel industry is not just economical, but it's important for their survival. So the key point is, while that we argue that there is a need to reduce the fashion industry's environmental footprint, which is very urgent and non-negotiable, we must also ask, what is the cost of compliance for the manufacturers in Global South? Well, if you look at the research from their perspective, the research on environmental sustainability and circularity from the developing countries' perspective is very limited. So if you're interested on doing research on that, there is a wonderful area to do research. With the limited research, including our own, we realize that there are a lot of barriers these manufacturers face. Financial constraints, limited access to sustainable technologies, weak and under-enforced environmental regulation, low institutional capabilities, and insufficient support to circular initiatives are creating limitations for these manufacturers to adopt to these standards. So these limitations will risk creating unintended economic and social consequences to these manufacturers. So in very short, if sustainability standards are not matched with the support and equity, they risk becoming unjust. So this brings to the core of the paper that I am presenting today. So our goal was to look at this overlooked group of people to bring the voices and realities of the manufacturers in Global South to the sustainability conversation. And we also believe the importance of this at the right now, because it will have impact in shaping the new policies that are being developed at the moment. And also we believe without understanding the local context, capabilities, constraints, sustainability efforts risk being both unfeasible and unfair. So I will not cover literature review sections, but briefly we borrowed literature from global value chains on private and public standards to explore the underlying mechanisms in detail. So for our research, we selected Sri Lankan apparel industry as a case study. The choice of Sri Lanka was informed by two compelling reasons. First, Sri Lanka stands out to its notable environmental upgrading trajectory. The country has invested significantly in sustainable manufacturing, including building the world's first eco-friendly apparel factory. The leading manufacturers in Sri Lanka have also pioneered several prestigious international certifications, such as the world's first LED platinum certified factory, world's first passive house apparel manufacturing facility, which demonstrated strong commitment to environmental innovation. Second, the country also presents a diverse pool of apparel manufacturers with varying capacity. If you're a little bit familiar about the apparel industry, there are manufacturers with different capabilities. One we call original brand manufacturers. So these are the manufacturers who have contractual relationships with the brands, but they also operate in niche markets with their own brands. Then there is original design manufacturers. They are providing a complete solution from design to delivery to their brands. And then we have original equipment manufacturers. They do sourcing and they involve in manufacturing clothes and also do a little bit of quality assurance. And the final one is the cut, make, trim manufacturers who are under strict control of the brands. So they just manufacture, they just stitch the cloth and give to the brand. So we had in Sri Lanka, there is a group of these manufacturers, including original brand manufacturers, design manufacturers, equipment manufacturers, and cut, make, trim manufacturers. So having a diverse pool enables us to analyze how these standards impact different types of firms differently based on their capabilities and position in the apparel global value chains. So before I present the findings, let me give you a more context to what makes Sri Lankan apparel industry unique. So I believe this will be very important to understand because the findings coming from the Sri Lankan industry will not be directly relevant to the other countries because the countries have different capabilities and different strategies and different upgrading positions in the global apparel industry. But we can get a general understanding what the impact could be based on the Sri Lankan manufacturers. So actually, if you look from this table, Sri Lanka is just 1% of the global apparel export. It's a very small market. It has never been a cost player, as you can see from the table. It's least competitive in cost because the production costs are high and there is a very limited scale. So Sri Lanka's competitive advantage has never been the price, but from early stages, they have differentiated through quality and compliance. And also they have prioritized sustainability as a strategy. So they have a high social and environmental sustainability standards. And also 60% of the export values come from the original design manufacturers. So these manufacturers are catering to high-end value-adding products in the industry. This is very rarely seen among the countries. It's only seen among the Chinese and some of the Indian manufacturers. But 60% of the export value for Sri Lanka is coming from the original design manufacturers who are in the higher upgrading status in the industry. Then the industry also benefits from very strong industry associations like Joint Apparel Association Forum, Sri Lanka Apparel Exporters Association, who actually have a strong, powerful position to influence the policymakers, working directly with the intergovernmental organizations to promote the sustainability agenda for Sri Lanka. Then manufacturers also benefit from an educated workforce and they have strong partnerships with the local universities and development institutions like Sri Lanka Institute of Nanotechnology, who offer specialized programs for textile and fashion design. Further, Sri Lankan manufacturers have collaborations with some of the high value adding global brands. So it's good in a way when you have high value adding brands in partnership, you can mature and learn from them and quickly upgrade in the apparel industry. And not only that, they also work with organizations such as Ellen MacArthur Foundation, Sustainable Apparel Coalition, and different United Nations organizations to strengthen their sustainability efforts. And also the industry is relatively consolidated in Sri Lanka. The large-scale players are the ones who are responsible for the larger part of the value addition, and they also influence and shape the knowledge spillovers of the small-scale players. So understanding this unique context is very important in case if you're wondering what can be the context for maybe Indian manufacturers or Bangladesh manufacturers or other manufacturers, it can be slightly different because the capabilities differ from manufacturer to manufacturer. So the main argument and the main finding like that was not all manufacturers will feel the impact of these shifts in the same way. That means the policies and standards need to be tailored to fit to the abilities and situations for the different manufacturers. So even in Sri Lanka, we suggest that the standards and how the brands impose standards onto these manufacturers needs to be different because one size one size fits all will not work even within the same country. So coming to the findings briefly, we recognized that industry leaders are not just responding, but they are proactively adopting to these standards. They are ahead of the curve because they have been building the necessary capabilities for a very long time. So they have been building the factories, getting certifications. So sustainability has never been a checklist for them. They have embedded sustainability for their organizational DNA for a long time. And also these companies have large in-house teams solely focusing on environmental sustainability, including engineers, environmental scientists, even biodiversity specialists, which you might not even have in a typical apparel manufacturing facility. They have even gone further, setting up specialized innovation subsidiaries with patent holding researchers working on new materials and technologies. So they are developing specialized products such as health tech, game tech, using technologies such as nanotechnology, biotechnology, and cleaner production technologies. On the digital side, they have leveraged advanced technologies such as blockchain technologies, experimenting with environmental platforms or product lifecycle management platforms. So they have the digital capability to provide the data that the brands ask for when looking at the environmental sustainability aspects. Not just the local expertise, they have collaborations with the international partners. They collaborate with large number of international universities to validate their products. And for example, one of the manufacturers was a pioneering partner for Ellen MacArthur Foundation for their gene redesign project. So all this has been made possible because these manufacturers have close relationship with high value adding brands for a very long time. As these brands matured in their sustainability journey, so did the manufacturers learned from these manufacturers and evolved. So they are having good space to react to these changes and lead the curve. But also, during our interviews, they highlighted they even face certain challenges and hidden costs. For example, increasing product design and development expenses was repeated by the managers because they do not receive adequate prices from the brands to cover the cost of investment that they are doing. So it's not sufficient to cover the investment that they do for sustainability. And also, the lack of harmonization of standards cause additional costs. Now, imagine there is this one brand they supply for, and imagine if they have operations in the US, UK, and EU. So the reporting requirements for these three countries differ. So these jurisdictional differences will impact. And these manufacturers do not only manufacture for one brand, they manufacture for 10 to 20. So that means their compliance cost will increase. And also, while sharing the sustainability data, there is also risks on the data privacy and confidentiality. As you know, the apparel industry is a cutthroat business with heavy competition. So there is, when sharing data, there's always risk on privacy and confidentiality. So these are just costs relating to the environmental sustainability and circularity aspects. I have not even looked into the other costs that these manufacturers face because of the nature and the dynamics of the industry. So this is the situation of the leading manufacturers, but if we go to the other levels of manufacturers, the situation is not that favorable. So then when we consider about the context of next level of manufacturers, particularly the original design manufacturers or original equipment manufacturers, there were two groups with different issues. One group has the innovation capability, but they do not lack the visibility in their sustainability efforts. The other group is motivated to improve their sustainability standards, but they are constrained by the financial, technical, and human capital limitations. So unless these two groups try to reduce their limitations and try to increase their value addition, there is a risk of exclusion from the industry in the long term. If we consider about the small scale manufacturers, particularly the small scale cut, make, trim manufacturers, well, we are not sure if they will survive these shifts because they do not have alignment to the standards. They have either very little or no alignment to these standards. They have weak financial and technical capabilities. They are the most risk of exclusion. And the multinational enterprises can quickly shift between the suppliers. So that imposes a risk on the existence of these companies. Not only that, their suppliers, and also maybe the factory floor workers working for that. And these standards can act as non-tariff barriers to exporting to these markets. So, therefore, given all these unequal capabilities across the firms, it is very important that policymakers, including the national and international and also multinational enterprises, take these factors into consideration when designing the sustainability standards. I will quickly take you through the policy implications. I will not go into the very detailed recommendations that we do. It is part of the paper which is under review, but I will provide an overview of some of the recommendations that we do. So let's focus mainly onto the small scale manufacturers. So these manufacturers will struggle to meet new sustainability standards. To support them, it is important that the policymakers strengthen the national infrastructure, digital systems, increase the access to incubators, accelerators, training programs that build the necessary skills into sustainability, digital technology with these manufacturers. And it is also important that we take actions to protect the vulnerable stakeholders, particularly the very small scale suppliers and factory floor employees who always face the constant risk from the market fluctuations and shifting buyer contracts. So social safety nets, exit programs, targeted support mechanisms is very important to shield them from sudden shock. Human capital development is very critical for the industry at the moment. Policymakers should make investments to develop new skills that is not usually sought by the industry, maybe increase the digital skills, sustainability skills, focus in the industry. Promoting corporate social responsibility programs and supporting sustainability certifications in the factory level is very important. Then also attracting the high value adding multinational buyers will help to increase the knowledge spillovers and industry growth. So activities should be promoted on that aspects as well. And also the particularly the local governments need to monitor the activities of the multinational organization who have a tendency to shift between the manufacturers, which can negatively affect the small scale ones. So activities should be monitored and exit programs should be implemented. And again, it's very evident that the large-scale firms are the ones who are going to dominate the sector and ones who will survive this shift. So it is important that they are empowered and made them as green champions, and also try and create an apparel ecosystem so they can integrate the small-scale players to the industry to create a more symbiotic environment in the industry. Then, given the limited time, I will not go through in detail to managerial recommendations that I have provided in my paper, but we firmly believe the real transformations will happen inside the factory floor. So it is also very important, not only the policymakers, but just the managers also working in these garment factories take these standards into serious consideration and devise activities accordingly. First, it is very important to transform the individual's mindset. One of the striking examples coming from the Sri Lankan apparel industry, managers always highlighted how important it was the sustainability-oriented mindset and innovation mindset helped them to have a leading position in the industry. So other countries also needs to try and cultivate the sustainability-oriented mindset in the organization and embed it to the DNA of the organization. And it is important that the apparel manufacturers try to upgrade their resources and capabilities. I know they struggle with limited financial capabilities. That's why it is very important the policymakers at international and national level to support them with the financial capabilities, but also help them to develop advanced design and development capabilities, investments in advanced technologies, creating of innovation subsidiaries, maybe centralized environmental, sustainable, and innovation teams. And also, it is very important that they create strategic collaborations, not just within the apparel industry, but also beyond the apparel industry to progress in this current competitive landscape. And also, organizational policies must evolve. The policies needs to focus more on sustainability and digitalization and social standards going forward. So overall, with these strategies, we believe at least some of the challenges very unique to the apparel industry can be tackled and managed. So finally, to conclude, I know I have been rushing a little bit to give us the limited time limitation, but finally to conclude, as we have seen, the global fashion industry is entering a new era, one that is not just defined by style or speed, but also by sustainability and accountability. The global standards will reshape how the fashion is produced, consumed, and disposed. Leading brands are adopting, but the real test will be whether these shifts will create opportunities rather than new barriers for the manufacturers in Global South. If sustainability is to be truly global, it cannot be built from exclusion. It needs to be inclusive, just, and supportive, recognizing that the path to circularity will be very different to a small-scale factory in Colombo or maybe in India or Bangladesh to that of a luxury brand in Paris. Therefore, the choices that we make in policy rooms, boardrooms, factory floors, and even in meetings like this will decide whether the fashion industry will become a driver of environmental regeneration or whether it will become a cautionary tale of missed opportunity. Therefore, the future is not waiting. The question is, are we ready to design it together? So thank you so much for listening to my presentation. I believe now it is the time to question and answers. I'm more than happy to answer the questions that you have. Sorry if I think I have exceeded my time limitation, but that was a lot to
Don't worry
process.
at all. Don't worry at all. That was a brilliant, brilliant presentation. And I'm sure the audience also echo my thoughts in saying that you very clearly explained and shared your research and your work on this particular topic. And yes, a lot of positive responses coming through in the chat box. We will begin with the Q&A session now. First of all, thank you to everyone who sent in your questions in advance via the registration form. So what we'll do is we will start with maybe one or two questions from the registration forms, and then we will move on to questions in the chat box. So if you have any questions for Denanjalee, please do send in your questions in the chat box. But before we begin any questions, Denanjalee, do you have any prompts on the questions you would like to receive, maybe around your research
Mhm,
topic? Yep.
mhm. I would be more than happy to answer questions centered on the environmental sustainability and circularity at this moment, because that is what I specialize in. So I'm very happy to answer those questions, but I also have a little bit more understanding about how the apparel industry operates. Maybe I can respond to those questions. You can definitely contact me in email, but I believe maybe let's focus on environmental sustainability for the moment, Eva.
Perfect. What we'll do is there's a chance that we will overrun by a few minutes. So I do appreciate the audience who are here, and I do appreciate your time. So if you feel like you need to go for your next commitment, please do feel free to leave. As I said, this webinar has been recorded, so we will share the recording on the CSC's YouTube channel. But if you have a few more minutes to be a part of the Q&A session, please do continue to be present in the webinar. So the first question is, what role should multi-stakeholder collaborations play in accelerating circularity and reducing the environmental footprint of global clothing value chains?
Oh, thank you, Eva, for this interesting question. So I try to address it a little bit also in my presentation. So I will also add a little bit more insight onto that, as I highlighted in my managerial implication slide. Having partnerships within the apparel industry and even beyond the apparel industry is very important to progress in the industry. For example, if you take the European Union, they have even come up with a textile platform encouraging the brands, the manufacturers, the policymakers, the institutions researching on apparel to be on this platform so that they can learn from each other. And also, if you take from the Sri Lankan apparel industry's context, where I can provide an example. So the leading manufacturers, one of the key factors for their success was having multi-stakeholder partnerships, not just with the brands that they manufacture, but with the research and research institutions and universities. For example, they had relationships with the Sri Lankan universities, international universities. That is very important to develop their skills and capabilities. Then some manufacturers even had relationships with the companies who are not typically into the apparel industry, for example, electronic companies, gaming companies, because they are looking at the game tech and incorporating these electronic components to the clothes that we wear to produce smart textile. So having partnerships like that is very important. And for example, I will also tell another example, sustainability oriented partners is another important partner to have. Maybe with the recyclers, very important collaboration to focus on and leading circularity related organizations such as Ellen MacArthur Foundation, Sustainable Apparel Coalition. Having partners like this will be very important to manufacturers going forward because these partnerships will stimulate different capabilities to these manufacturers. So multi-stakeholder partnerships is very important to navigate this transition. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you so much. The next question is, if large manufacturers succeed in meeting these requirements, but small and medium-sized enterprises lack the resources and technology to comply, what solutions or policy interventions could help support SMEs in transitioning towards sustainability?
Thank you, Eva. So it's a very interesting question. As you seen, the existence of the small-scale manufacturers is questionable at the moment. Sri Lankan context is different, but if you take the other countries, they have a very large scale or pool of small-scale manufacturers in those countries. So the ideal solution coming from a lot of the manufacturers and managers in the Sri Lankan context is either the small scale manufacturers focus into alternative business model, maybe rather than becoming cut manufacturer trimming organizations, they can look into recycling clothing or maybe look into advanced innovative aspects in the industry. So they need to gradually diversify their business orientation from mass-scale apparel manufacturing to either to niche markets or to become recyclers or other circular business models to survive in this competitive environment. Or else the large-scale manufacturers should have agreements or any kind of contractual relationships. So they will absorb the scale or the capacity of these small-scale manufacturers to help them survive these transitions. And from the policy perspective, it is very important that these suppliers are protected with safety nets, exit programs, so the multinational enterprises will not quickly shift from the small-scale manufacturers for the large-scale manufacturers, which is usually the case in a lot of organizations. Sudden factory closures happening to these small manufacturers, so protect them. This very important safety is provided to these manufacturers.
Thank you so much for your response. It's quite interesting to hear your thoughts on this. I'll move to the questions in the chat box now. Please feel free to, I know we've reached the time limit, but please feel free to send in your questions. We might have time for maybe one or two more questions. So we have a question from a alumnus from Uganda. I'm not sure if they're a scholar or alumnus, but they are from Uganda. And the question is, they lead a manufacturing company transforming plastic waste into assistive devices in Uganda. And they wanted to know more about the user participation in partner collaboration. What are your thoughts on this?
Oh, very interesting question again. So as consumers, they have, I think that is the question. So the users, the consumers have a vital role in whatever the sustainability transformations done in the industries, may it be recycling of plastic containers or maybe fashion. So the users play a significant role because they are the ultimate consumers of these products. So trying to understand the environmental footprint that they create is very important, and responsible consumption is very important from the user's perspective, and getting integrated into recycling, reusing agenda is very important for the users. So active participation and trying to buy these recycled, reused products will help to keep forward, like push forward these industries into operation. So I think integrating users is very important. And again, it depends on the country's context. So sometimes it will be very easy to integrate the customers from the developed countries because they are aware of these recycle efforts, they are aware of the environmental footprint that they contribute to, more than integrating the users from our part of the world, the developing countries, because they do not have the awareness. But I also know some of the cases from the other industries. For example, if you know, for example, there's a company called Plastic Bank. So Plastic Bank collects this plastic bottles from the ocean, and they provide blockchain-based currencies to the recyclers. So that is how the users, actually they are the ones who discard the plastic waste to the oceans, and they also recycle and get collected. So if you're interested, you can read the case of Plastic Bank that shows how these people are integrated to these recycling systems in order to create effort. Actually, that is an interesting case where they try to eliminate poverty by implementing these plastic uh, collection systems and blockchain technologies.
I think we have time for one more question. So the question is there a convergence of health shock and clothing chains or apparel industry, or the other way of asking the question is like, is there a scope or has anything been initiated in terms of convergence between health shock and the clothing industry?
So, if I understand it correctly, Eva, does the health shock means COVID-19 pandemic? Is it?
I could ask the author to ask the question. Harsh, if you are here, would you
Yeah,
like to unmute and ask your question?
yeah. Hi, thank you for this wonderful presentation. And
Thank you.
basically, I'm a health professional, so I was thinking something like, is it healthy to wear this t-shirt or something? This question basically. I mean,
Oh,
so like have we like initiated something based like a life cycle of a t-shirt or like the circularity which you've talked about?
oh, very interesting question. So, being a health professional, I'm sure you might know the answer when you consider about the recycled garments, so which are made out of plastic, and the impact that could do for the body if we wear them. So that's why actually the natural cotton that is made can be better in terms of health perspective if we consider. But if you look at the developments happening in the industry, actually some of the Sri Lankan apparel manufacturers are going to the micro details of the fabric composition, and they are engineering these fabrics to increase the smart features of fabric. For example, there is companies looking at female uh, products, like it's called Femtech. These companies are engineering the laundry that we wear to make it more sustainable and also to address some of the health concerns the customers will have. So that aspect is also there, ongoing, happening in the industry. Those are the latest development happening in the industry in terms of health perspective, but the pollution and the substantial impact will that is also there coming from the material composition. So
Yeah.
that is the answer to that. I hope I answered the
Yeah.
question.
I mean, I don't want to add to it because I'm not an expert, but I heard a Commonwealth alumnus in his keynote speech once at one of the CSE events mentioned about the non-iron kind of like clothing that you get, the iron-free clothing that you get, like shirts and all in like big brands.
The wrinkle-free?
The wrinkle-free, yes,
Oh,
the
true.
wrinkle-free, yes, the
Yeah.
wrinkle-free clothing. Most of these clothing actually have certain kind of like chemical components which are harmful to your skin. And I still remember that conversation with the speaker from then. Do your own research, please. Don't quote me on this, but I do remember I was quite impressed from their speech. And that was one of my takeaways. So whenever I see a wrinkle-free clothing, I am very mindful about that fact now.
That is true, Eva. I can confirm on that. That is very true. Like the electronic components and everything that we attach on clothes will have an impact on the body. And there is like the electronic textile, there is research ongoing, studying the negative aspects onto the body, although they help to track and trace maybe the heartbeat or the body functioning, but the interaction with the body will also have negative effects. Not only that, when they discard it to the environment, it's very difficult to like compose, like it takes a very long time to decay these electronic components, and also it can impact the microorganisms and the water flow. So that aspect is also there.
Definitely.
Thank you for
Thank you for your question. Well, with this, unfortunately, I will have to end the Q&A session, but we do have the post-webinar networking session. So please feel free to, stay back and if you have the time and connect with other attendees. But before that, if we can move to the next slide, please.
Oh, give me 1 second. Yes.
I know we have missed on a few questions in the chat box, and apologies for that. But please feel free to connect with Denanjalee over either email or LinkedIn. You can connect with her and ask your questions or connect to discuss her research. I'm sure she'll be more than happy to share her research. I know she has an upcoming work that will be published very soon. I'm not sure if Denanjalee, you want to talk
Hopefully.
about that. Uh, th-
Oh,
uh, Anyways,
hopefully.
yes, hopefully very soon. But please do connect with her, and if you would like to learn more about her research study and her work, and if you would like to share your work as well within this space, please do connect and share your thoughts and ask your questions, and she'll be more than happy to connect with you. And once again, apologies to all the questions that have come through the chat box, which we could not address during the Q&A session. Um, Dhananjali, before we end the webinar, any final words?
Oh, thank you so much for attending to this session. It has been wonderful to share my research findings with you. So, and also thank you for being sticking with me for like even I passed the time allocated to the session. So thank you for still being connected with us. And thank you, Eva and the team, for organizing the session. Thank you so much.
Thank you.